So I'm having a bit of a dilemma, guys. Now, in the last update video for the little depot layout, quite a few people said, I think you should do the bridge next. And I do agree, we do need a bridge, definitely. But I'm trying to decide what bridge to do. And I did decide on reutilising this bridge, which is off, what's it off? It's off the old scene on Harefield in the cabin that I took out, which was where the branch line and main lines come through the bridge, and then the main lines, there was the entrance for the depot, just off to the side. As you can probably tell by the fact that there used to be a second arch. So this is the way around it used to sit. So we had trains coming out of Harefield, round the curve, and we'd have the branch line come through here, the main lines would come through, and then the TMD would go off from there. So obviously I did quite like this bridge, hence it's now chopped up, but I thought I could repurpose the single portal for this little layout. Now the idea was that this would sit in here. I'll move that out of the way. This would sit in this location like so and sit like that. Now I thought that looked quite cool. Obviously it needed some finishing off, but I like the idea of that single bridge. However, what I don't like now is this area where it goes into the back scene. It needs something to blend it all in, and that was a problem. So I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I'm not happy with that bridge after modifying it to fit the space. So what that got me thinking is that I'm actually taking the brake spear section of the layout apart. If you know what the brake spear section was, that was the sort of cut and cover tunnel area that I had, and then it went through to a small little single platform station. So that's all being ripped up, as I think I've mentioned previously, but that leaves me with a lot of retaining walls by L-cut, because these went all the way around it, so they'll probably look a bit more familiar to you. And I've also got a few little portals like so, L-cut tunnel portals. Obviously these are double, which isn't a problem. And I've got even more retaining walls here, so that made me think I could do something with that lot instead. So there are the arched tunnel portals, and then we've got some retaining walls. Obviously I need a retaining wall in the corner there, or I could just move this over just to give you an idea. But if I did something like that, then that would obviously blend in with the back scene a bit more. I could maybe even step it down as it goes on, or I can extend it with these ones as well that I've got. So the arches extend along this way a bit, and then we could have maybe the JS models building that I did, maybe that could go in here somewhere. I'm not sure really. Obviously I've got to fit that somewhere. So if we did that as a bit of a centerpiece sort of thing, might be quite cool. But would it look a bit random just being in the middle there? I'm not sure. I mean, these arches are quite long. We've got two missing, but these actually go through onto the next board. So if we put all of them in here, then we could even have the building over there. Not really sure, to be honest. The good thing about this building actually is that I've painted it to sort of match the Bachmann building as much as possible. So it would look good if it was in the same sort of vicinity as it. So if that kind of sat there, then we had the retaining walls up against it, that might help and work a bit nicer. I don't know, but I'm open to ideas. The only thing is, if we put the building over here, we're gonna have to mess about with that concrete pad that's down there. Or we stick it off the end of the concrete pad there. I'm not sure. It's a very difficult one. So I've got to have a think. I think I'm going to go with the arches though. So what I can do is make a start doing this part of the bridge. We've got a nice bit of width there, so we can have some sort of detail in there. I think I'm going to go against my usual rule of having bridges at angles, and I will just keep this one simple and go for 90 degrees. It will just make my life a lot easier. And then we'll use the whole width. And all we need to do then is at the back of the bridge, we can put some of this to simulate that the bridge sort of carries on that side. I think that'll look quite cool. So let's get started then. I've got this lovely bit of birch ply, which is an offcut from Tim Horn. These used to be the fascia boards that go along the front like so. However, I don't use them, and on this layout I'm going to need a thicker one. As you can see, we don't want that step there, so I'm going to have to make some anyway. So I'm going to use this to create the bridge deck. So that I'm going to cut it so it's nice and square, 90 degrees. Obviously we've got a nice laser cut square edge at the back, so I'll put that up against the baseboard. I will score along the edge of the baseboard front, then that will give me a line to cut, and then we'll have the perfect shaped piece to go on the top. Right, it might look like a bit of a mess, but we're getting there. So this is going to be the front tunnel portal. I've put the background brick on the top section, and I've kept the nice laser cut edge at the top so that I can just give it a light sand. It'll be all nice and flush there. Then we've got these bits which go over the top. They sit on like that. Obviously you've got to be glued on. And then of course you need the tunnel portal and such. I went to glue the tunnel portal on. Luckily I didn't, because I then remembered that if I glue the tunnel portal on flush, when I then put the arches on, I wouldn't be able to get the back piece in, because the back piece sits behind. So these actually need to be stepped up just slightly, and in fact they'll be flush with this top piece. So that's the reason for this little sliver here. Obviously I've got to get this in place, so I'm going to have to cut that. Well, no, that's fine actually where it is, but I'll have to not put any in this position, because of course, as I say, this is going to basically be sat there, and then this will sit on top, like something like that, and then of course this will sit next to it. So I've got to put a little piece down here, little piece down here for that to sit onto, and then that will give it some support. And I might just use a few more little offcuts. So what I'm using is the little bits that the laser cut pieces come onto, like a little sort of laser cut sprue. So I'm just cutting that out and using that, and I'll probably just do a little lip so that that can glue against that, and that will space it out the correct amount. I've also cut the bridge deck out. That's over by the layout, so we'll come to that. But another thing I realised is if I glue all this down straight away, then I'm going to be unable to drill some holes and screw through to create the main structure. So really I should get the top pieces in, finish that, and then make sure I've left some room to get some screws through. And obviously I have to countersink them so they're flush, so that the brickwork can stay flush. But we're getting there, so hopefully it'll come about and look all right. There's the bridge mostly built up. Obviously I've got to paint it all similar sort of colour to the retaining walls at the back there, but that's all to come. I'm not going to paint it just yet though, because as you can probably tell, I need to order a few extra pieces from Elcut to finish it off. But I think it fits the sort of space nicely. It almost gives the impression that there used to be 2 lines in here and they've chopped it back to 1. So that's why you got the extra wide tunnel portal there, which I think is pretty cool. And I have made another decision which doesn't really affect this bridge, but the idea I was going with originally is that this bridge would be a standalone thing, and then I would basically build another bridge that would swap in and out, because eventually of course this is going to be 2 foot wider when this attaches to Harefield. So obviously we would need another foot of bridge, because the branch line tracks are going to run parallel to this, so we'll basically need another portal here somewhere. As I say, I was going to build this bridge and have this completely separate, and then have another complete bridge, but I think we'll probably be able to get away with actually gluing this down in position and keeping this as is once I've finished it, and then basically just build another half of the bridge to go on the other board and fit against it. I'm hoping that the gap in the bridge pieces I can minimize, because it's sort of laser cut stuff and I can use a little bit of filler here and there. And basically I'll build the other bridge with the other baseboards attached to this one and this glued down, so I'll basically build off it this way. So I'm thinking it'll be 2 separate bridge pieces, but they will form one eventual bridge structure. I think that's just a bit of an easier way of doing it, rather than have this being able to come out. Then I've got to mess around with the ballast underneath it. I've got to obviously scrape a bit out. As you can see, that's why it's wobbling, because it's sat on ballast over in that corner. But it means I can glue this down. It stays with this board. It doesn't have to come out with the back seam, which is a bit of a pain, and it will just look better. Because I'm doing that, of course, I have to make the back of the bridge look good as well. So the back of the bridge does also have L-cut retaining walls and arches on. Obviously, I'm not going to take it out just yet to show you. You'll have to bear with me on that. But it's much the same as this side. There are a few bits needed to finish it off, so I've got to make a few little L-cut orders. But basically, you'll unbolt this back seam, fascia sort of surround, and then if you look at the bridge from this direction, it will be all lined and all painted up properly. You can't really see it through there, but you'll have to take my word for it. Whether you can see that there's brick in there or not. The camera won't focus, so you have to take my word for it. But yeah, basically the bridge will be a complete bridge all ways round, if you like, whatever. So that should look fine. But obviously, as I say, I'm going to have to wait for some parts to come. This bridge is a bit wider than the one that I was going to put in. So we've gone with some wheels paving, and I've also raised the paving up. So I've put the paving on some off-cut, laser cut card, same stuff that this comes on, basically the sprues it comes on. So that's raised the paving up nice, because I thought, when I've done this before, the paving looks okay, but it's always been a bit too shallow. And then on this side, I actually bought some little square plastrut stuff from 4D Model Shop in the centre of London. It's quite a good little shop if you've never been. It's near Fenchurch Street. I think the closest station is Aldgate East, if I remember. But I had some of that stuff, so I thought I can build that up. It gives more like a sort of curbstone appearance on that side. Obviously, it needs painting, and I have to put some scores in it. But the road obviously is quite narrow, which I don't mind, but we've got a decent sized pavement, so we can have a couple of people walking down there, maybe a couple of people looking over. And also this now gives me somewhere to put a couple of these street lights, so I'll probably put two in there, sort of a third and 2/3 of the way down it, something like that, just to light that up. And I'll have to get a bit clever with trying not to light the back scene up too much, so be a bit careful with some black paint maybe to try and mask it off. But yeah, I think that's all we can do with the bridge for now, for this episode certainly. So I'm trying to think of what else I can really crack on with. My mind has changed again, as always. Back on the bridge. The bridge looks pretty much the same as it did, except I've spun it around 180 degrees. So there's good reason for this, and that's because the bridge isn't central to the arch, that is. So you can see we've got the bridge arch, we've got one retaining wall piece, we've got another retaining wall piece, and then we've got a gap, which I was going to fill up with just plain brick. Now, the problem I had was this retaining wall. I was going to have it right against the back seam and glued to the back seam, so it came in and out with it. However, when the layout then goes into the main hairfield layout, you obviously won't have this because you'll view it from this side. And I figured it might look a bit strange, just a bridge there on its own with no sort of transition down. So it would be nice to be able to keep the retaining walls on the layout. But then I thought, well, it's so thin. How am I going to I've got to keep it there and make it strong enough so it will stay upright and not get knocked and stuff like that. And I thought, well, I could bring the bridge forwards and put some wood behind it, but with it the other way round, of course, it wouldn't have worked because the end retaining wall would have sat like that. So by turning the bridge around, it's given me that little gap where I can just bring the wall out, something like that, and then it can stick out a bit on its whole length. And then at the end, we can just put some brick going across and then maybe a small little embankment. That then got me thinking as well, what else can I do with the back seam? And I like the idea of having a bit of height. And then I remembered I've got these two industrial units, and I've never really found a place for them until now. So I quite like the idea of those being in the centre and the depot kind of squeezed around them. And it obviously gets rid of a massive blank space at the back. The only problem with that was, obviously I had the signal box here, which is now up here. The signal box was a bit problematic anyway in its position. It was a bit of a silly thought. And because we're going to have tracks running along the front eventually, I figured, well, the signal box might be nice in the middle. And we've always had this big hole that I need to cover. Now, I did build this little sand house from Bunter's Yard, part of his Didcot collection. And that was nice, but that can always go somewhere else. Probably want it over near where the loco is being serviced, in all honesty. So I figured, well, we'll put the signal box down here in this space. Then it's right at the front of the layout for people to look at when they're standing here. They can see inside the signal box. That'd be cool. And also when the main layout is all together and you've got another foot on the front here, the branch line will run along the front, and we can have the junction up here somewhere for getting obviously in and out the depot and changing from up to down in preparation for going into the platforms. So I figured that would be quite a cool little idea, and that solves a lot of problems. The other thing with that is, by putting this building here, it sort of takes away from the fact that you've got the supports here. It draws your eye away a bit. I do need to trim this one slightly so that this will sit flush against the back seam, but that's no big deal. And when that goes back, obviously that will sit flush like this one does, and then we can work around it. So the thinking then is I will use some palisade fencing from Wills. That will then go across the front. I'm going to put it upside down so you get the idea. So that will sit down there somewhere. So there's a little walkway just in front of the industrial units, and then that fencing will also continue over to the retaining wall. We'll have a small little embankment coming down, so I might shorten the retaining wall to allow that, and also to allow a bit more of a view in. And so if I bring it, in fact, bring this forwards, so I can slide it in there. So I'm thinking I could shorten the retaining wall to something like this. That allows a little bit of embankment coming down, just a steep little piece, and we can work on that from there. As I say, fencing all the way along the front and around the perimeter. Then that fences off the depot. We can have some fencing just on the back here, just a bit of depot space. We've got our little Bunter's Yard sleeper retaining wall just there in the background. You can kind of see it if I go over. So a bit of fencing between those. And I think that will bulk out the scene nicely, and it also gives a nice reason for the little sweep in the depot. And when you're viewing it from that side, it kind of blocks your view a bit, which is a bit more realistic, but you can look through the middle, which would be quite cool. And the other thing is the layout in that configuration is lower down by probably half a foot to a foot, so you can still look over it, whereas in this configuration you can't really. So it just works well. I will obviously have to repaint these. I don't want them to look so basic, so I'll do them a different colour that's a bit more toned down. I will split the units in two so that they are 4 different businesses, and the businesses will reflect people that have helped me with the layout. So likely be AGR Model Railway Store, probably DCC Train Automation, Tim Horn Baseboards, and then one other that I'll need to think of. It's just a nice little nod for those that give me a hand. And in turn, that also means that my little factory building can go up the back to fill that piece of back scene up there. So I think that'll work quite nice. What that leaves me to do in the meantime is scrape away some of the ballast around these buildings. I've got to take up the concrete hard standing that was there initially for the old office building, and I've got to put a new piece down that's the right shape and size to accommodate these units, because of course I want the walkways around the buildings to be concrete. And then go with that, paint it up in concrete, a concrete effect paint, which I get from Rust-Oleum if I remember. And then that should be looking pretty cool. Obviously a couple little lights here and there, and it should be a nice little filler for the back scene. Well, as you can see, half the layout is now missing, and that's because I've got the smaller of the 2 boards down here in front of me, and I have been working out where this half of the factory backs is going to go. And this is the position so that we just have this door overhanging. And what I'm going to do is basically use one of these lines to cut up with the multi-tool to get a nice straight cut. And then just the door and probably a smidge of the door frame will be on the next board. You can see I've used some Wills fencing and I've gone about as close as I want to go. That is the pinch point for the little siding there, slash head shunt. I've just got my Revolution Caroline coach there just to check clearance. Obviously the middle of a coach is normally the bit that pokes out as well as the ends. And we've got plenty of clearance there. It's realistic enough for me, I'm happy. So the fence is pretty much straight until this point, and then obviously it curves away. The reason I've not gone to the baseboard edge is because the retaining wall, as I mentioned earlier, will stick out somewhat. So that fence, hopefully the retaining wall should slot roughly up against it, and that should look pretty good. But yeah, so the retaining wall was obviously, as I say, finished there. Then we'll have probably a little bit of embankment, just a sharp little piece coming down, and then we'll have a little bit around the side of this building, a bit of a concrete sort of pad going around the whole thing, but we'll have a little bit of overhang on the sides, just to give the impression that it continues for the whole sort of length of the building, if you like. And then so I'm going to get this bit done first and make sure I'm happy. I'll probably cut the building, screw the building down, blah blah, and then we'll go from there and start doing that piece. So if I can get all this done, it'll be quite nice, because then I can start adding a little bit of foliage here and there, get away from the completely brown look of it all, and also start adding things like conductor rails for some scenery. But yeah, I think that's going to be pretty good. Well, we've jumped into the cabin. It's been a while since you've been in here. I suppose no one on the videos has seen the layout for a while, but it is still here. It's in a different configuration. We'll go into that in a different video. But the reason we are in here is because regular viewers of the channel would have realised I've not chopped anything up in a little while. And I've got a Bachmann Scencraft building. No, sorry, correction, I've got a Hornby Scaledale building. And as I think I explained on the clip previous to this, this is going to overhang the baseboard, so it needs a bit of choppy. So let's get to it. I'll get my safety squints on and we'll get to work. Voila. Now then, we've got our professionally chopped up building. Obviously we've got a few little touch-ups to do, but that should do the job nicely in there. I'll just put that in there, line her up, and you'll see that fits nicely where the fencing is. Just gives them a little walkway down the back of their factory, so that's pretty cool. And obviously the fence goes around the side as we wanted, and once again plenty of space. So now we need a concrete hard standing for it to fit on. Easy enough. All we need is a bit of black plastic card. Chop it out carefully. Got to be careful to get the right angles so it fits against the fence. Then that simply goes in there like so. That fits in there lovely. So now we need some concrete paint. There's our concrete hard standing sorted for this board. So I'm pretty pleased with how that's come out. We've got a nice little texture on there, so up close and personal it looks like a concrete effect. With a bit of dirt it'd look even better. And I suppose we could go ahead and fly tip some stuff in the little alleyway to help with the effect. So I'm happy with that. Before this board goes back in, I might as well get conductor rails sorted, get some other little bits done. So I'm going to start with the third and fourth rail. What I did, I learned from previous mistakes where it ended up being laid in a zigzag, and I made myself this little bit of plastic card with a little slot in. What that allows me to do is I can slot that inside the rails, and then I can obviously see where the sleeper is and line my drill bit up in the middle of the sleeper, and that just means that I'll always be in the center of the forefoot. So that works really well. So I'm going to go along and do that. I think the minimum spacing is every 4 sleepers, between every 4 sleepers to every 6 maximum, I think. So I'm going to go with 5 because over the course of time it saves you a couple insulated pots, and they are a bit of a pain to thread on the end of the rail there. I also go against the norm, and I actually use a drill bit that is the size of the large bit of the pot. I don't know how well you can see the pot, but they do have like they'd have a sort of peg on the bottom, which is what people normally drill and fit. However, I use a drill bit that is the size of the bigger piece. I really can't sort of show you, I don't know. No, I can show you on this little diagram. So you drill a hole, put that little peg in, and then your conductor rails would sit out proud of the running rails. However, I like a bit of a compromise so that you can actually clean your rails without taking all the paint off the conductor rails. So I used to use a drill bit to countersink this piece in so that they would sit about the same height as the running rails. Then I still didn't get on with that, that was still a pain. So nowadays I actually use a drill bit which is the same size as this piece. So basically all you have sitting out of the sleeper is this. So if I cover the rest, you just see that. Now it's not the end of the world because it still looks fine to the untrained eye, but it means that you can clean your track, and it's definitely worth doing. As you can see on here, it gives you like a rough location where to put them in a third rail scenario. It says on here every 4th sleeper. If you look online, there's a few little sort of websites with guides and stuff. And then obviously you want to bend down the end rail. So for example, we're going to have this rail, I'll just tap the screen so it goes in focus. This rail is going to end around here. So we need to bend down just that end piece, and then up this end, obviously it's going to be butted up against another one, so we don't want to be bending that down. So we want that to just sit up against, so that would look fine. Obviously, being underground, I've got to do this twice, so I've got to fit the centre rail and the outside rail. And then if you want to go for more realism, you can link some little wires between them all, solder some wires on, and weather it all up nice. That'll all look pretty cool. But yeah, it's a lot of cutting rails to suit. So I've got some offcuts here. Never throw them away because they always come in handy. And I've got some more rail and insulated pots. I've got plenty more in the cabin as well if I run out. So I'm going to fit those. Well then, sometime later and a bit of swearing, we've got conductor rails sorted on this board. I'm pretty happy with them. And that's this board all done for those. I did look at some pictures, and of the pictures I found, any with a slip, they didn't seem to have any sort of conductor rails in the middle, probably for obvious reasons really. There's not a lot of space because there's a lot going on. It'd be a bit different if it's a diamond crossing, but as it's a slip, you just end up with a bit of a gap. So you've just got to make sure on something, say like an electric locomotive, like Sarah Siddons, for example, you just have to get enough momentum up to allow you to coast across, which does happen in the real world. A good friend of mine is a tube driver, and he has mentioned numerous times about trains getting gapped coming out of Hainault Depot, I believe it is, on the Central Line, for example. So there are certain places where you've got to be careful of that. So I guess it's kind of realistic. Going back to my little template that I said I would use, so I said I'd put that basically between the forefoot of the track, and then hold that there in one hand and then with the other hand drill through. I instead decided to do it a different way because it was taking so long. So what I did is I would actually put it in the track and then instead just mark it with a pencil. So I had a line across the sleeper, and then that was a lot quicker, and I could just come along with the drill and drill each one consecutively. And you can see here the pots, you can just about sort of tell that they're there. Obviously in the real world they would sit above the rail height, but in the model railway world that makes it an absolute nightmare to clean your track, as I mentioned before. So these are just slightly below rail height. So if I run along there with a track rubber, you shouldn't take the paint off, or even if you do, it will just be minimal. But that's the way I did that. And also on the baseboard edges, I've tried something new. So what I used to do is just rely on the insulator pots and then leave this end just to be sort of free floating. And if you catch it, it just rips them out. And then I went to a place called 4D Model Shop in London, and I found these brass pins. They are 9mm long and they're 200 pack, they're only a few quid. So I thought I'll try those because you can solder to brass. So what I've done is I drilled a hole bigger than the pin itself. It's about the size of the head. Then I have pushed the pins in, and I've gone all the way in so they sit kind of sunk into the sleeper. Then with a Dremel, I've just flattened them off slightly so they're pretty much flush with the top of the sleeper. That then means I can come in with the soldering iron and I can actually put a little blob of solder on them. And then when I put the rails in and push the rails down, I can do that whilst holding the soldering iron there. And then that will solder the rail to the pin underneath. And of course it doesn't matter that the hole in the sleeper is bigger than the pin, because of course you're going into wood under it, and that will keep it secure. So these are now nice and solid, and that's something that I've never had before. So I think I will do that in the future. It took me a little while longer, but I think that'll hold up better in the long term. A little detail you can do also is just to add some wiring in. These probably are slightly on the large side for what you actually need. But the cables are pretty thick and chunky anyhow, so I think when they're sort of weathered down a bit, it'll look pretty good. We've got a bit of ballast to fill in here and there where I've had to scrape some out to get them under the rails. But the basic idea is to link the outer rails all together. So we've got obviously this outer rail here, you've got that link running under there to this side, and then you've got this link running from this side to this side. And then you've got another one from here running underneath to here and coming back across. All that leaves me to do is run another cable or two from this set over to this set so they're all linked together. The alternative is to give the effect that they're buried. So I've done that on the negative center rail here. So what I did is I came in with the drill at a slight angle. I drilled into the baseboard and I cut a little stub of wire, and I've poked that down into the hole. And then basically just soldered that to the side of the rails. So inside the hole it doesn't go anywhere, but it gives the effect that it goes underground and pops back up and connects onto that side like they do in the real world. Well, now that I've got the conductor rails in, I can move on. You can see also I just added another wire or two just to help with the scene, and I think it's come out pretty nice. So what I want to do now is get rid of all of this brown space at the front of the board, which of course in turn will become the back of the board depending on what way around I display it. So I'm thinking we need some way of getting vehicles into this little depot. And if you noticed, my bridge is wide enough so that a vehicle can travel under the right hand side of the arch. Whether it's the right hand side as you view it or not, I'm not too sure. It might be mirrored, but anyway, we'll have the train running through just across the left slightly, and then we will have enough space to get a single vehicle through on that side. So I'm thinking we could take advantage of this, and in the overall eventual plan for the complete layout when it goes out, the full 50-ish foot, obviously, as I've mentioned plenty of times before, there'll be another 1 foot on this side of this board. So that allows me to have a turning circle. So I've measured it out, and if I go for a 20 centimetre circle, then that little dot that you can see is a sort of roundabout, like a mini roundabout that I've put in the center. 20 centimeters overhangs the board by around 6 centimeters onto the next board. So we've got plenty of room there to get the road set up in, and then still have enough room for the branch lines to eventually run down the front here. My thinking is, first of all, it will look nice just having a little depot access road, because most depots do, and people seem to forget that stuff does need to be delivered in and out. People need to be able to get to work somehow. And I see so many depot layouts where people seem to think that the employees just magically arrive at work on some sort of magic carpet or something. So you've got to have some sort of road network somewhere. And I'm thinking there is an elaborate plan for further down that end where the terminus will be of the branch line. And the idea is that it'll be 2 foot wide. It'll be a similar setup to what I had on the old Breakspear part of my layout when it was in the cabin, except it'll be a foot wider than that ever was, and we won't have the hidden main lines down the back, so there's plenty of room. Now, the idea is for us to have a Weissman car system circuit going around the station. Now, there's no reason why the Weissman cars couldn't branch off and come up here, go around the roundabout, and then shoot off back the other way. We could even put a little stop sensor in so that a car comes and waits here somewhere. So I'm thinking down the line, we could future-proof this so that if I want to put that in, that is an option. And all it will take is me to put some magnetic strip in, and then basically a bit of tweaking and go from there. Obviously, when we take the depot out on its own, we won't be able to do that. But it's no big deal. We could just place some cars around and it gives you the idea. So I think that would be a cool little way to do it. So we'll basically have a passing point up here. So it's going to be a single car width road coming under the bridge. We'll have a little passing point just before the substation. You'll come past the substation, and then it will fan out here into a nice big turning circle, and then the road will continue on just slightly to a little car parking space and such by the signal box, which is just on the other board, and then that would be the end. So obviously a car would come in, it would go around the roundabout and reverse into the parking bay, because on a depot normally cars are told to reverse park. I think that's the best use of the space that I can come up with. I don't want to go too mad, but it also gets away from it being all brown, and we can put some foliage in between. We can put some safety railings to segregate off the track area to the road, and again, yeah, I think that'll look pretty cool. So I'm going to draw it out, what I think, and then I'll probably crack out some paint, and for now just paint on a road surface, and then later down the line, when I'm happy with it, I can come along with the tarmac paint and all that sort of stuff and really go to town. But for now, it will give us the idea of what we want to work towards. So to create the width for the road, obviously we've got bits of loose ballast here and there. So I am just going along with a chisel and just scraping that ballast off. And I'm going to do it in a nice line all the way up. And then I'm basically going to get my Class 37 out, because it's fairly wide compared to some of the underground stock. I'm going to put that on there and see how much clearance we need to the side. And then we will work out how much room we've got width-wise under the bridge, because of course you want the vehicles to be as far to the middle as you can because of height restrictions. But yeah, I'm just going to scrape some ballast away. I'll draw it out, and then I'll probably paint something on, and then we'll see how we're looking. Well, I've marked out where the tunnel is, and I've marked out a little passing spot before the substation, because there's an extra piece to go here. So now I'm getting busy with the paint. So wish me luck. Hopefully it comes out all right. Obviously it's going to be completely black for the moment. It's going to need a bit of weathering, but it's only a temporary finish anyway, so it will change. And there's the result. You'll have to excuse the fact that the layout is now taken down and it doesn't quite fit on the dining table. However, it's a lot easier to work on it while it's here. But I have made the decision also to, after moving it, sack off the signal box completely. The signal box was going to go here, but I figured now it would be a nicer idea to have the depot road continue all the way up And then I'm thinking, so that they can access the shed area for deliveries, things like that with a little van, we will cut these sidings back a couple inches down here somewhere, and then the road can continue round the back of them and join up somewhere at the back of the shed. We could have a little stores area here or something like that. So once again, the thinking is that when we've got the other 1 foot of layout here, the branch lines will run on the right hand side, and then on the left hand side of that 1 foot board will be the continuation of this little road, and that should serve the depot nicely. So I've also gone around the perimeter of the road with some plaster to form a curb-like appearance. So that's done the job nicely. I've gone inside and underneath the bridge also. We've done the little passing point. I'm really pleased with that actually. It's something that I nearly forgot to do, and I thought, do you know what, that'd be a nice little addition. And you would easily get a car in there so that something else can come out. So I'm very pleased with that. I think that's a cool little thing. As I said, the road's going to continue. The original idea was to stop it here and have it just a little roundabout sort of set up here, and then stuff can go back, and a couple of little parking spots. But now obviously we've alleviated that, so we would probably do something with the other board parking wise and work it out from there. I've also gone ahead and got the rest of the concrete base in for the factory warehouses, so really pleased with that. Obviously I had this one done already. I've now gone ahead and fitted this board with it, and it just sticks out the side here. And then I've put some more fencing in just to kind of barrier it off, and then we're going to have to decide what to put in the alleyway. Maybe a couple little funny things. I've got a couple ideas, but we'll have to see when it comes to it. The fencing then goes off just in a 45-degree angle. The reason I've done that rather than go straight to 90 degrees is because it gives some sort of scope for putting some sort of foliage or something behind in this area to just blend it into the back scene a little more, because then I've got that small little sleeper retaining wall from Bunter's Yard, which goes from the front corner of the shed over to around here somewhere. So then you've just got that small little area of nothing in the background. But I might put a little piece of fencing just in the foreground there, I'm not sure, we'll see. But yeah, I'm so pleased actually that I've gone down this road, excuse the pun, and I'm very happy with how it's looking. The only other thing I've done is the substation I have changed slightly. It's still the same, except I took this piece up. I glued this down to start with, took this up because I wanted to get rid of the gap that was between the fence and the substation building itself. And to do that, I've put the substation on top of the base for the outer part. And that is why the main building itself is now raised up on a big concrete pad. So you can see that there, and you can see that I've now got this curb running around the outside of it. So that just obviously fences that off, sort of thing. I've got to do a bit of touching up, but I'm pleased with that. So the original idea was the road was going to sort of go off this way, hence we've got a slight little line there where I've patched this bit in. So it was going to come off there, but I thought rather than that, we can just bring it straight out and make maximum use of the space. And I think that's gone very well indeed. So that's going to be it for this video. I'm pretty pleased with how we're looking. I'm basically going to continue more of the same. I'm going to get a bit of greenery on the layout as well and fill in the bits of ballast, and then we'll come back and see how I've got on. But thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one. Take care guys, and goodbye.